My name is Maggie Tillman, and I have recently inherited an old family farmstead in the Ozarks. At first, I thought it might be my chance, a financial break, my first real home. Raised a city girl in Southern California after my mother left the Ozarks, I had buried memories of the farmstead in faded photographs and stories. So, when the lawyer called about the will, surprise quickly turned to curiosity and hope. I needed to see where my mother grew up, where the hills and barns from those old photos became mythic in my mind. But what I found now haunts my nights. Eyes at the window, claw marks on old beams, the sense of something circling my bed until dawn, making me doubt whether I'd ever truly belong here. The drive down set the mood. The cracked county road wound through the Ozarks, ridges golden in the late afternoon light. I kept reminding myself this trip was supposed to be practical. If the property was still standing, maybe I could sell it and finally have the money for a down payment. Yet with each mile, as the forest pressed closer, I felt less like an heir and more like a trespasser on my own bloodline's land. Before heading to the property, I spent a night at a sagging roadside motel in town. The man behind the counter, a wiry, gray-bearded figure, watched me sign in, his intensity unsettling. "You heading out past Ash Hollow, miss?" he asked. His voice carried the weight of something more than curiosity. I nodded. "Yeah, family property out that way. Just taking a look, maybe a night or two." His mouth tightened. He leaned in close. "Then you best be careful. Folks say there's something out there, some kind of animal. Not a wolf, not a bear, something bigger. Moves quiet, always just out of sight. Yellow eyes in the dark. It watches. It follows. Folks around here call it the Ash Hollow Stalker. That thing has been out there for a few years." I laughed softly, trying to shake the dread crawling into me. "Sounds like a campfire story." "Maybe," he responded flatly. "Maybe not. Just make sure you lock your doors, and don't go outside after dark." His warning clung to me as I drove on. Twisting roads closed in by oak and hickory, shadows stretching longer across the asphalt. I told myself it was just small-town superstition, but more than once I caught myself glancing into the trees, searching for movement. Finally, the farmstead appeared at the end of a gravel track, the road narrowing as the woods all but swallowed it. Ridges of oak and hickory folded close, branches overhead twisting like skeletal arms. Limestone bluffs cut pale against the horizon, while the land dropped to mist-filled hollows. The old house sagged in the clearing, paint curling from its bones, weeds crowding the porch steps. Behind it, the barn leaned half-collapsed, doors crooked, the roof jagged against the reddening sky. I stepped out of the car, the air heavy with pine resin and the sweet, loamy damp of the forest floor. Cicadas whined in unison, their buzzing electric in the still, hot air. Somewhere close, a whippoorwill called, its notes swallowed by the green walls of the woods. Inside, the house smelled of mold and dust, the dampness clinging to my throat. Every creak and echo heightened my unease as I moved through the empty rooms. Memories of imagined lives, other people's voices, other people's furniture, made me feel like an intruder inside my own family history. By sunset, I headed toward the barn. The fields had gone to seed, grasses whispering in the breeze. Fireflies pulsed at the tree line like dying stars. The barn's broken roofline loomed, its great door ajar like a mouth mid-scream. I hesitated at the threshold. My flashlight flickered as I stepped inside, and the smell hit me, decay and mildew. But under that, something sharper, feral, like an animal's den after a fresh kill. The beam cut through the gloom, catching rusted tools suspended like bones from nails, and broken planks crisscrossed in chaos. Then I saw them, deep, deliberate gouges in the support beams, far apart and surprisingly long, not weather damage, not termites. Claw marks spaced too wide for a normal animal, and much too high up the post. At their base lay a tuft of coarse, ash-gray fur. I crouched, reached out, then froze. Behind me in the pitch beyond the door, something clicked. The air shifted. My skin prickled. I slowly turned, light trembling in my grip. The doorway framed only darkness, but it wasn't empty. Something loomed just beyond the beam's reach. I didn't see it, but I felt it. A wrongness in the space, like the forest had shaped a shadow and taught it how to stand. Then came the noise, a long, wet exhale, inches from the beam. A sound made for me. I slammed the barn door with a yelp, fingers fumbling the latch. The metal groaned, then clicked home. I backed away, heart thundering, the fur still clutched in my hand. That night, I unrolled my sleeping bag in the childhood room I barely remembered. Everything smaller, dimmer, more fragile than my memory allowed. Clinging to that thin familiarity, I tried to ignore how exposed I felt. Every whisper echoing through the empty halls. The claw marks haunted me, and the motel clerk's warning echoed in my mind with every sound. At first, it was only small things, a faint scrape across the porch, a soft thump that might have been a loose shutter in the wind. I stayed in my little room with the door locked, unwilling to step out into the hallway. I didn't know if there was anything wrong out there, but I just couldn't bring myself to go and check it out. I held still, listening, every muscle tensed, clutching my small flashlight like a lifeline. The minutes dragged, each sound magnified until the silence itself seemed alive, waiting just outside the thin wooden door. Much later that night, after silence lulled me into a false sense of security, boards groaned under weight, something paced outside. Each heavy, deliberate step right below my window shot panic through me. Logic failed. I knew how isolated I was. I lay frozen in my sleeping bag, unable to look away from the window, helpless and alone with my dread as my phone sat useless in my hand. Finally, after a few minutes of silence, I forced myself to raise the flashlight, beam quivering as I pointed it toward the glass. For a long, unbearable second, there was nothing, just my own reflection, pale and frightened. I lowered the beam slightly, sweeping it across the yard. At first, there was only darkness, trees standing still in the night. Then, just as I started to believe I had imagined everything, something shifted at the edge of the light, a shadow darker than the rest, moving where nothing should have moved. For the briefest instant, I thought I caught a flash of eyes reflecting the light, the way a canine's gaze gleams in headlights. But it was gone as quickly as it came, slipping between the trees, leaving me unsure if I had truly seen it at all. I lay back, trembling, flashlight tight in my grip. For hours, I listened to claws brushing the siding and footsteps circling before silence settled at dawn. In the morning, I opened the door to find the mud around the house churned with prints. Not boots, not hooves, and not quite paw prints either. They were wrong, too large, spaced too wide, elongated almost like hands. 5 toes, tipped with deep gouges like claws. The prints pressed so heavily into the earth, they almost looked stamped. The stride was long, circling the house in uneven arcs, clustered beneath my bedroom window, as if whatever it was had stood there for a long time, watching. I crouched down, my fingers shaking as I pressed them into the muddy prints. The earth gave way. The claw marks matched my fingertip too well. I straightened, unease crawling up my spine, and scanned the tree line, feeling utterly watched and more alone than ever. I whispered toward the trees, "What the hell are you?" The answer came at once, a howl rolling through the hollow, low and resonant, shaking the ridges like thunder. My blood ran cold. Later that morning, still rattled by the night's events and the strange tracks, I drove into town. Outside the small brick sheriff's office, the flag stirred in the humid breeze. Inside, it smelled faintly of coffee and paper, photos of old deputies lining the walls. Sheriff Ruthie Griggs looked up when I entered. Tall, weathered, she greeted me with a guarded stare. As soon as I explained who I was, I saw flickers of recognition and maybe unease. "The old Tillman place," she murmured, her eyes studying me as if she expected trouble. I asked her directly if she had ever heard of an animal called the Ash Hollow Stalker. At first, she brushed it off with a vague shake of her head, muttering about local stories and how people like to scare each other. But then she leaned back in her chair, fingers tapping on the armrest, and her tone shifted. I'll say this much, she said slowly. I've been out to that hollow more times than I can count, found things I couldn't explain. Livestock torn up but not eaten, sometimes twisted in ways that shouldn't be possible. Dogs gone missing, only to have their collars show up days later in the dirt. Folks disappearing after taking the wrong trail. And once, she hesitated, her eyes narrowing. Once I saw something myself, crossing the road just outside town, in the beam of my cruiser's headlights. It was huge, with a hunched back and long arms that nearly touched the ground, and it moved wrong, like a man trying to walk on legs that weren't right, loping fast, limbs splayed. The shoulders were too high, the arms too long. For a split second, the light caught its eyes, big and set too far apart, glaring at me before it vanished into the tree line. I slammed the brakes, but when I got out, there was nothing, no tracks I could follow, just silence. And I swear to you, I've never felt cold like that night. I swallowed hard, goose flesh prickling my arms. So you believe it's real? The sheriff gave me a long, measured look. I believe you should be careful, and if you're smart, you won't spend another night out there. She paused, then leaned forward, lowering her voice. Between you and me, I've found things I never put in any report. Car doors torn open by clawed hands, scraps of clothing snagged high in trees, like something had carried people off the ground. And more than once, I've found blood trails that just stop in the middle of nowhere, like whatever was bleeding had been lifted out of this world entirely. That's why I tell you, don't take this lightly. I hesitated, then asked in a whisper, what kind of animal are we dealing with? Griggs shook her head slowly, eyes hardening. If it's an animal at all, wolves don't move like that, don't have arms that long, or a body that big. Bears don't leave wide, five-toed prints shaped like hands. I don't know what it is, and that's what makes it dangerous. Most locals will tell you it's a werewolf. I don't put stock in folklore, but she exhaled sharply, as if the admission cost her something. I can't deny that the description kinda lines up. Too many stories, too many sightings. I can't think of anything else that fits. After leaving the sheriff's office, I sat in my car, considering my next steps. Her words had sunk deep. I couldn't spend another night at the farmstead, but I still needed to find a way to sell it. Seeking clarity, I headed to the Main Street diner for coffee. The owner, a kind-eyed woman in her 60s, noticed me staring into nothing and asked gently what was wrong. The sorrow in my face must have betrayed me. I told her about the farmstead I had inherited, about the strange things I had heard there, and about the creature I thought I saw in the dark the night before. She listened quietly, frowning, and set a hand on mine as if to comfort me. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You don't have to explain, she said. I know about the Ash Hollow Stalker. We all do. I've never seen it myself, but I've heard it howl, and I've seen what it leaves behind. Don't go back out there alone, child. Stay away from it if you want to keep breathing. That was when a local farmer at the counter turned in his seat. A heavy-set man with sun-browned skin. He introduced himself as Hank Coulter. His family had worked the land in the hollow for generations, and he had clearly overheard everything. He turned toward me with a slow, deliberate look, eyes narrowed as though measuring my worth. You're the one who inherited the Tillman place, he said in a low, knowing voice. That land's been empty too long. Folks call it cursed, but I don't believe in curses. It ain't the land, it's what walks it. And if you've been out there, then you know it too. That thing doesn't let go easily. He didn't laugh off the stalker either. He admitted outright that he had been dealing with it before. Livestock gone missing, fields torn up, nights when it circled his own house. He explained that his family had been living with and managing the creature for about 5 years, keeping their animals locked in reinforced pens, carrying rifles at night, and teaching their children never to wander far after dark. It wasn't that they had beaten it, he said, only that they had learned to live around it. Then he surprised me by leaning forward and making me an offer on the spot. He said he'd be willing to buy the place, though he named a figure that was far lower than I had imagined. Better someone local deal with it, he explained. I've been facing that thing half my life. Don't mean I like it, but I know how to take care of it. A city girl like you doesn't stand a chance alone out there." His words chilled me, yet I felt a sense of relief, knowing someone was willing to take on the burden. Still, I remained uneasy. Hank was aware of the risks and used them to negotiate a lower price. Ultimately, I agreed to sell the property to him. We arranged to meet the next day, sign the papers, and have them notarized. As I left the diner, guilt and doubt gnawed at me. Passing the danger on, even to someone who claimed to be prepared, didn't feel like a clean escape. But what choice did I have? I left the diner with guilt and doubt gnawing at me. Passing the danger on, even to someone who claimed to be prepared, didn't feel like a clean escape. But what choice did I have? I decided to stay in town one more night, finish the sale, and put this godforsaken place behind me for good. Instead of risking another night at the farm, I booked a room at the motel on the edge of town, the same place where, 2 nights before, the gray-bearded clerk had first warned me about the Ash Hollow Stalker. The thought of returning to that creaking house in the hollow made my skin crawl. Instead, I drove back just long enough to grab my belongings, stuffing clothes and the few supplies I had into my bag before heading to the motel. Locking the door and sliding the deadbolt into place, I felt a fleeting relief. It was just one more night, a dozen miles away from that thing, and the sale would be done. I told myself the nightmare would soon be behind me. Settling into the room, I checked the window latch and security chain twice, drew the curtains tight, and pressed my palm to the doorframe to be sure it was sturdy. Only after these rituals did I finally let out a long breath. I took a long shower, letting the steam fill the bathroom until the mirror blurred. The water was metallic, and the pipes moaned, but it felt good to wash off the farmstead. The room seemed almost cozy, a cheap bedspread, a humming window unit, and a crooked river print. I dried my hair, changed, and climbed onto the bed with a paperback. Night fell, and neon seeped through the curtains as cars hissed past. The words became a flimsy shield as I read until I drifted off, thinking, "It's fine, just one more night." A sound woke me, soft at first, almost part of a dream. A faint scrape, then a hollow thud. I blinked into the dark, unsure how long I had been asleep. I didn't know what time it was. The neon sign outside still leaked faint pink through the curtains, but the night pressed so heavily it felt late, deep in the hours when people stopped moving. My heart was already beating hard as I sat up and listened. The window unit purred. The hum felt oddly loud against the silence. Somewhere beyond the thin walls, a television murmured with tinny laughter, muffled by distance. Pipes creaked, as if someone above me had turned on a tap. The carpet smelled faintly of old smoke and disinfectant. I held my breath. Under these familiar motel sounds was something else, the faintest rasp, like something heavy brushing against siding. Then a hollow knock, irregular, like knuckles or claws, tapping wood. The noises slid through the room's thin shell and into me, making the hairs along my arms prickle. I let out a shaky breath and started to lie back down, though my ears strained for the next sound. The next noise was sharper, a dragging rasp that seemed to come from the back wall, where the motel property ended and the woods began. It moved slowly, as if something was feeling its way along the siding. I swung my legs over the mattress and stood barefoot on the carpet, the pile cold under my feet. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself. "It's nothing." For a while it went quiet, and I began to wonder if I had imagined the noises altogether. Maybe a trick of my mind after the trauma of the previous night. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself the scrape and knock were only echoes of fear. Minutes passed, thick with silence. Just as I began to relax, it came again, but now from a different place, the front of the room. A rasp dragged across the siding near the door, followed by a dull, testing knock right at the frame, as if claws were tapping in search of weakness. The shift in position made my skin crawl. Whatever it was circling my room, probing. My first thought was the stalker, the same thing that had haunted me at the farmhouse. But then doubt rushed in. Could it really have followed me all the way into town? That seemed impossible. Still, My stomach tightened, because deep down I knew it wasn't impossible at all. Then, from outside, something dragged lightly across the window, as if a hand or paw was inspecting the glass. I sat on the bed in the thick hush, hardly daring to breathe, every muscle taut with listening. I was scared to death, but I needed to know what was happening, so I slid out of bed, bare feet sinking into the carpet, and crept to the window. Pressing myself flat against the wall, I leaned close and tried to peer through the narrow gap in the curtains to get a glimpse of what might be waiting beyond. At first, I saw nothing but the empty parking lot, my own car parked crooked near the door, and the clerk's ancient pickup truck sitting under the buzzing sign. The stool inside the dimly lit office was empty. No sign of the clerk, just the shadow of a moth flickering over the glass. The emptiness made the place feel abandoned, like the motel itself was holding its breath. The strange noises had stopped, and for a moment I convinced myself I was being foolish, that the sound could have been anything. A branch dragged by the wind, a stray dog or raccoon nosing around the dumpster. A prickle of unease still ran through me as I edged back, clinging to the fragile hope that maybe I was safe after all. That was when a massive, dark shape swept past the window, blotting out the neon glow for an instant. My breath caught, and I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. The sheer bulk of it was wrong, too high at the shoulders, too wide across the chest, to be any man. The outline lingered in my vision even after it had passed, leaving me shivering with the certainty that I hadn't imagined it. Then it circled left, slow and deliberate, its weight crunching the gravel as though it wanted me to hear every step. A low huff rose through the glass, not quite a growl, not quite breath. A moment later, I saw it lean in close. The glass fogged up as the creature pressed itself against it, and through the narrow gap of the curtains, I caught a clearer glimpse of its face and form. Its fur was matted and coarse, stained and tangled as if it had forced its way through thorns, and worse. The body was hulking, with shoulders unnaturally high, a back hunched and muscular, suggesting power beneath the wild fur. Its jaws were impossibly long, lined with teeth both sharp and crooked, some of which crowded forward past its blackened lips. Each breath from its flared nostrils steamed the glass, and its massive hand left smeared prints as it pawed the sill, its gleaming eyes fixed on me, burning with animal intensity and something more, an intelligence and hunger that made my skin crawl. In that moment, I was no longer looking at something wild, but at something that watched back. In the back of my mind, a voice begged me to move, to grab my phone and dial 911, but my arms and legs refused to respond. My gaze was locked on that monstrous face, every detail seared into me. I couldn't break free of it. My fingers twitched toward the nightstand, but the thought of reaching away, of breaking eye contact seemed impossible, so I just stared, trembling, unable to do anything but breathe shallowly and pray the thing outside the glass wouldn't find a way in. The first impact wasn't a smash, it was a shove, testing, deliberate. The window frame bowed inward with a soft, sickening flex. The curtain billowed toward me. I flinched back and hit the dresser with my hip. The second impact came a heartbeat later, heavier, as if the creature had set its stance, committing its weight. A sharp crack zigzagged across the pane like lightning. The third blow shattered everything. The pane burst inward with a sound like dry bones breaking, and a flood of cold night air punched the breath from my lungs. The curtain tore free of its rod and collapsed over something, forcing its way in. I saw, for a few heartbeats, a monstrous form thrashing beneath the fabric, snarling and flailing. Every movement sent glass shards skittering, and with each guttural growl, I hugged myself tighter, frozen but desperate to act, counting each second until it broke free. With a final violent shake, it tore free, flinging the curtain aside. I finally saw it. Its huge shoulders filled the room. It had to hunch under the ceiling. Ash-gray fur, thick and bristling, made it look even larger. Its head was wrong, wolfish, heavier, jaws working as if tasting my fear. As saliva spattered the carpet, I locked eyes with it, paralyzed. There was no other word for it. A werewolf. And I was alone, cornered. Snapping out of it, I backed toward the foot of the bed, hands fumbling for anything with weight. The creature angled its head, ears pricking at the rasp of my breath. We regarded one another for a pulse-stretched second, and in that moment, I felt a strange, awful attention settle on me. Curiosity or recognition, or hunger dressed in a thinking creature's skin. Without thinking, I snatched the heavy ashtray from the desk and hurled it straight into the beast's face. The marble struck with a dull crack, jerking the creature's head to the side. The stalker reeled back, more startled than hurt, then straightened with a guttural snarl that rattled the walls. Its lips peeled away from its teeth, and a low sound built in its chest, vibrating through the drywall. Then it came forward in a blur, long forelimbs swinging, claws extended like hooked sickles. I dove sideways, barely ahead of claws that shredded the bedspread, the box spring squealing beneath the assault. Hands fumbling and mouth dry, I grabbed the motel Bible and flung it. It bounced harmlessly away as the stalker's head snapped back to me. I knew I had only seconds left. It lunged again. There was nowhere to go but the bathroom. The door was 3 strides away. The creature was 1.5. I bolted. The werewolf pivoted, long toes splaying for traction on the polished wooden floor. Its swipe missed me by a breath, a claw tip kissing the back of my calf, hard enough to open skin. Fire lanced my leg and nearly dropped me, but panic kept me moving. I stumbled into the bathroom, threw the door shut, locked it, and pushed my shoulder against it with all my weight. Hollow core wood met the full momentum of a nightmare as the werewolf tried to get to me. The door bowed in the middle and popped back, the bolt squealing. I planted my feet against the tub, palms flat against the veneer, and pushed like I could hold back a tide. The first hit, I could pretend, was an accident, the creature colliding with a barrier it hadn't expected. The second disabused me of that hope. It crashed against the door with a deliberate, punishing drive, and the jam shrieked. Splinters drifted like snow. The cheap chrome knob ground against the strike plate, leaving a shiny half-moon of scraped metal. My teeth rattled. "Please," I heard myself say, to the door, to the world, to anything listening. "Please!" As clawed fingers slid under the half-inch gap at the bottom. Instinct finally overpowered fear. I raised one foot and brought it down with all my strength, stomping hard on the hooked digits. Pain shot through my heel, but my slippers spared me worse. A shriek tore out of the creature, high, guttural, furious, and the hand jerked back under the door. For a heartbeat, I dared to believe I had bought myself a moment's reprieve. Hot breath seeped through the cracks, smelling like copper and wet fur. The creature huffed in frustration, then reared up and hammered on the door. The bolt shrieked. A split snaked from the latch to the middle rail, widening with each blow. I could see through it now. Glass, shredded curtains, the empty window, and a wedge of ash-gray fur. I searched frantically for a weapon. Out of options, I tore the shower rod down with a metallic screech and gripped it like a spear. When the next set of claws probed under the door, I brought the rod down with all my strength across the exposed digits. Something cracked, not bone, I didn't dare hope, but the impact was enough to make the creature snarl and rip its hand back once again. The rod rang in my palms and numbed my fingers. The stalker roared, no other word fit, and drove its full weight into the panel. The bolt popped halfway free with an ugly metallic snap. The door sagged inward and remained in place only because my body was wedged between it and the tub. Something in my shoulder sparked white-hot pain. I screamed and shoved back, slippers squealing on porcelain, teeth bared like an animal. The door crept outward a fraction. The next blow would end it. Just as I began to lose all hope, the sound of a siren bled into the night. At first, it was faint, nearly drowned beneath the beast's snarling and guttural growls, but it swelled quickly, layering into a keening wail that pierced even the chaos in my ears. The stalker went suddenly still on the other side of the door. I felt its attention shift, not entirely away from me, but outward, wary and calculating, as if it knew that time was running out. 2 shots cracked in quick succession, the concussions slapping the bathroom walls like open palms. Over the beast's snarling, I heard a new sound, a painful shriek so raw it curdled the air. It seemed that at least one of the bullets had found its mark. The creature thrashed outside the door, claws raking wood. Then a heavy crash shook the walls as it bolted, its footfalls pounding across the wreckage it had caused. More shots followed, each one echoing through the tiny bathroom like hammer blows. Then, amid the ringing silence that followed, I caught the sharp bark of the sheriff's voice, low, furious, swearing into the night as if cursing the thing for escaping. "Maggie!" Sheriff Griggs's voice, closer now, cut through the ringing in my ears. "It's okay. Can you hear me? Maggie, answer if you can." For a few seconds, I could only tremble, my muscles refusing to obey. My throat was dry and tight, my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, and no sound came. I pressed my forehead to the door, fighting the urge to sob, forcing air through my lungs until at last, a single word scraped free. "Here," I managed, barely above a croak. "Bathroom. Good. Stay there for a second." Footsteps, human, measured, crunched glass. "It's gone." For now, another voice murmured something on a radio. Boots shifted. From farther off, I caught the strained voice of the motel clerk, shaken but alive, his tone full of fear and disbelief. I turned the lock with clumsy fingers and edged the door open. The bathroom light fell across a nightmare geometry. The room was a complete mess. Glass scattered everywhere, the bed gutted and shredded, the window an open maw with the curtain hanging in ribbons, furniture overturned, and debris strewn across the floor. The night air poured in cold and metallic. Sheriff Griggs stood just inside the room, gun low but ready, eyes flicking between me and the torn window. The motel clerk hugged the outer wall with his own revolver up, breathing fast. "Don't step into anything sharp," Griggs said without looking at me. Her face was pale under the strobe of lights outside, her jaw clenched so tight that it was almost visible. "You hurt?" "My leg." Only then did the back of my calf begin to throb in earnest. A line of warm fluid made its way down to my ankle. Sheriff Ruthie Griggs flicked her glance down, took in the blood, and nodded to the clerk. "First aid kit. Now to me," she said, softer. "Sit down somewhere if you can." I lowered myself onto the closed toilet lid. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When the sheriff knelt with gauze and saline, I stared past her at the window, at the line of trees beyond the lot. They seemed closer than they had earlier, as if the forest had edged forward while we were busy not dying. "We'll get you out of here," Griggs said. "There's an ambulance on the way. You did well." "I didn't do anything," I said, and heard the hollow laugh in my own voice. "It came in." I hid. "You're still breathing," she said. "That's something." She slid her gun into its holster with a practiced motion, but kept her attention outward, like a lighthouse that could only swivel in one direction. "It doesn't like light and loud noises, or maybe it doesn't like being seen." I remembered its face pressed to the glass, the moment when its eyes found mine in the neon light and seemed almost to spark. "It saw me," I whispered, voice cracking. "It followed me here." Griggs didn't answer right away. Outside, a new swell of sirens could be heard approaching the motel. Doors slammed, radios crackled. The world returned by degrees. The buzz of the sign, the hiss of tires on the highway, a dog barking on the far side of town. Only the woods remained quiet, which felt wrong, like a crouch. "We'll talk later. First, let the EMTs have a look at you," the sheriff said finally. "And tomorrow we'll sign your papers with Hank if you still want to. But you're not going anywhere alone tonight." She looked at the broken window again, then added, almost to herself, "Damn thing is getting bolder. Never had an incident this close to town. Guess we'll have to find a way to get rid of it eventually." I followed her gaze to the dark beyond the neon. I could not see the stalker anymore, but the momentary reprieve didn't comfort me at all. It was still out there. The room still smelled like it, I'll probably remember that smell for the rest of my life. Okay, I said. I wrapped my arms around myself and felt glass grit under my feet, the tiny shards biting into my skin. The sheriff taped a pad of gauze to my calf, and when she stood, she offered me her hand, steady and warm. I took it and stepped carefully into the wreckage of the room. Every step crunched on broken glass, the air thick with the scent of gunpowder, blood, and wet dog. "Let's get you to safety," Sheriff Griggs said as she escorted me to the waiting ambulance. Morning brought release from the hospital. Antibiotics, stitches, and exhaustion. I limped into City Hall, where Hank Coulter and his lawyer were already waiting. Papers and pens lay on the table between us. But before I signed, I had to satisfy my curiosity. "I can't just sign without saying this first," I told Hank, my voice still hoarse. "The stalker attacked me last night at the motel. It broke into my room. I saw its face. That thing looks like a werewolf." Hank and his lawyer exchanged a glance, and then Hank leaned forward, calm as ever. "You're not the first to say that," he said. "Maybe you're right. I'm not entirely sure what it is. You're probably wondering how I've managed to live with that thing all these years. The truth is, I'm feeding it. Deer carcasses, chickens, scraps from the kitchen, whatever I can spare. It passes through my land regularly as clockwork. Doesn't touch my family, doesn't touch my livestock. It's smart enough not to bite the hand that feeds it." The words hit me like a cold wave. Shock rooted me in place. Feeding it? Bargaining with a monster? My instinct was to recoil, but then, slowly, understanding crept in. Hank had found a way to live with it. A terrible compromise, but a survival strategy all the same. "So you see," Hank continued, voice low and steady, "you sell to me. You walk away with money in your pocket. Let me handle it. I know its habits. I've lived with it long enough." I stared down at the papers, the signature line waiting, then back at Hank. My stomach churned, but the weight of exhaustion pressed heavier. At last, I nodded. "Fine, let's get it done." We signed. The notary stamped the deal as final. Hank tucked the deed into his jacket with the air of a man who'd just accepted a burden no outsider could ever understand. I left with my check in hand, afternoon sun warming the square. Beyond my car, the open highway beckoned. I climbed in, started the engine, and didn't look back. California awaited. A small apartment, a fresh start, and maybe someday, the memory of glowing eyes would fade.